and share a little bit about why Carol was nominated. So I'm going to read what her staff, her colleagues shared about her. Carol exemplifies all things positive as a District 287 employee. She has worked hard to develop herself as a racial conscious leader who is consistently working to help her teammates improve at their jobs. As a work experience coordinator, she works with all students to help them reach their potential. She looks outside the box to help those who are the most vulnerable and need the most support to make sure they are receiving the services they need to succeed. Congratulations, Carol. And so at this time, I'd like the principal and Carol to come on up.
Thank you, board members. I'm Principal Greg Beck at Ann Bremmer Education Center. I know there's new faces in here, so welcome, and a plug to come on over and visit ABAC anytime. We love to have visitors. We'll bring you by work experience program and get to see all the great work Carol and the team is doing. One thing that's great about Carol I wanted to share here off the cuff, when Marcy came and presented, first thing Carol said was, "Oh, I'm so humbled," and she started spouting off all these other great people who deserve the award.
That's true.
Yeah, and it's very true, and especially in that particular room she was in. It was a classroom with Angel and a lot of other staff who have been really important to the work experience program, the work we've been doing, especially when we look at that area of being a racially conscious member. And since I've gotten to know Carol, she's really growing in her own journey of advocating for all students. I remember during the pandemic, of course, our systems come through in the pandemic, and a lot of advocacy coming from primarily white families, and she was one that have made sure to advocate for all students got services as much as possible. With that, I'll let Carol take the mic. Congratulations.
Well, it is truly an honor to be recognized, and by my colleagues and by you all. Working for 287, this is about my 11th year with the district, and so many things through the district have encouraged me to become my best and to do my best for students, and I'm just very, very, very grateful and humbled. So thank you for all your support.
Thank you, Carol. Carol will receive a $500 award to use towards her classroom in supporting her students.
Yeah, we're really excited.
Yeah.
Congratulations. I think back to the mission that Sam started us with, and it sounds like the work that you do and the way that you embody your work is a beautiful example of that. So thank you so much. All right, we will move on to our second item and share the success and recognitions, which is a spotlight on Northern Star Online. And introducing our very special guest this evening is John Voss. So John, I invite you to join us. Oh, no, not John Voss. That's what my notes say. I'm so sorry. John's probably standing up there. You're like this. I mean, it makes more sense that you're the one doing it, but okay.
John can if he wants to. That's fine.
I'm so sorry.
So I'm David Vandenboom, the principal of NSO, and today we have a student, Abdi Osman, who is from St. Louis Park, and he is currently taking all of his courses through NSO. So Abdi, if you want to share a little bit about yourself and your experiences so far.
My name is Abdi Fatah Osman. I'm in school district 283, and I'm currently attending St. Louis Park High School, but I'm going through NSO as a full-time. 17 years old, and I'm in 12th grade right now. And it's been overall a comfortable experience. My main goal starting off high school was to make the most out of it, knowing that I made the most out of it when I ended high school. And I wanted to also end with a good score and be able to know what I wanted to do in the future. And NSO is a good way to pursue my goals. It's been with it has an organized program with flexible pacing for all students, so it helps a lot with understanding what you're doing and knowing what you will be doing in the future.
So I mean, it was a little bit difficult to hear. Do you want to talk a little bit about your experiences in the courses and with your teachers? And I guess is it, since it's virtual, I think a lot of times we think it's might be difficult to get in touch or build relationships with your teachers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Overall, I've had a really good experience with teachers. Very easy connection with teachers. There's multiple ways to message them. I could message them through the NSO website that I usually do all my courses, or I could also message them through email or phone. They usually respond really fast, and they also give in-depth feedback toward any mistakes I might make in any of my assignments. And overall, it's been a really easy connection, and the material through the courses directly reflected what I was aiming to learn. For example, if I was doing criminology, for example, I'm taking criminology, and the courses and the lessons what I learned from the lessons, the assignments are very connected.
And then one other question that I have is what do you want to do after high school?
I'm planning to go to I'm planning to go to Normandale College, and I'm aiming for a minimum of 4 years, and mainly aiming for major in engineering. I'm not fully decided, but I'm not fully decided, but I want to focus on being a mechanical engineer or a chemical engineer.
Yeah, Abdi, thank you so much for being here. David, thank you so much for introducing him and sort of serving as our moderator here for the last few minutes. We're so grateful that you're spending a little bit of your Thursday night with us, Abdi. And do you have a few more minutes if there's any questions that people would like to ask?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Are there any questions? Shannon, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for being here tonight. I'm really curious about the program that you're in because I have someone who's interested in pursuing it. One question I had is, how do you feel about connections with peers or peer group? Are there any opportunities for that in the classes?
Well, the classes are more focused on fixed. They're more flexible towards towards the individual pacing, but there's also other ways you connect with peers by working on assignments together, or there's also discussion posts you can make to make a discussion and talk with them.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Are there any other questions? Francesca, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for being
Assalamu
here. One thing I wonder about when you do all of your studies online, when it comes to things like, language arts or English or things like that, I can get it, history. Have you taken any foreign language classes online or any physical education courses during your time online? And what was that like?
I haven't taken any physical courses or any foreign languages since I finished them a few years ago, but it's more of the courses, whatever classes you take, the courses, the lesson that you learn from it it's directly connected to what you're aiming to learn when you first learn about the class. So I'm taking statistics, right? One of the classes I'm taking statistics, and I'm able to actually learn more about the main topic points that I wanted to learn about.
I like statistics, so it's good to hear you. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I admire that you're into that. Abdi, one question for you, especially because we have your superintendent from St. Louis Park Public Schools here with us, is how do you stay connected to St. Louis Park while you are taking your classes through Northern Star Online?
Every Wednesday, we have a meeting through Park Connections. So we're able to talk about how how we're progressing through the course and whether they're making good pace. And we're able to talk with other students that are also taking this, that are also attending Sales Park while also fully taking NSO.
That's really great. Love hearing that. All right, it looks like we don't have any more questions for you. So thank you so much for being here. You are now free to go enjoy the rest of your Thursday night.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abby.
Okay, with that, we move into our instructional report for the evening, which is an update on 2022-2023 enrollment that is going to be presented by Ben McGrath, Executive Director of Leadership and Learning. Thank you, Ben.
All right, good evening, Board Chair Brocky, members of the board. Super excited to be here and both share this report with you, this first ever report on enrollment in October. Also really excited to close out this tab on my computer, which has been open for about a week and a half every day. I also, before I go any further, want to introduce my colleague, Kim Helgeson, our Director of Technology and SIS. She's going to help me out with this presentation and probably answer questions. This report is complex, and I think on the outside, particularly maybe externally, we can look at an enrollment report and think this should be fairly straightforward. Count the numbers of students that you have inside of your buildings and go to the computer system and spit out that number and put it into a table and provide that number back. The truth is that this report in our district is very complicated. And oftentimes when we would talk about putting this report together, the questions would come and we would say, well, that depends, or well, that's complicated. So it is, because we have lots of students who are in transition in our district, whether that's because they're here for Port of a Year in a care and treatment program, or they're in our Northern Star online program. We have a lot of students who come in and out of our district. Kim's going to talk about EDM in just a second, help explain how we've set up these numbers for you that you have in your board book. But I also want to acknowledge, beyond just Kim and I, that I would say at least a dozen or more different staff members across the district contributed to this report, whether that was on the content, the format, the numbers, the double checking of the numbers, or some other function. That there were lots of people who contributed this to report. It certainly was not just the two of us. On the first page, your table of contents will help you navigate around this report. Again, this is our first annual. We do intend to be back with a very similar report next year. We'd love to get some feedback at the end and continue to make this a better product for you. Before I just go through and explain some highlights of the report, Kim, would you mind just touching on EDM and anything else that you'd like?
Yes, so I just want to go through a little bit of housekeeping and definitions, if you will. As Ben mentioned, a number of people have touched this report and had input into this report. And one thing that we do monthly here at the district is Student Information Services will send out a report to all of our sites on their enrollment, listing every student and requesting that they help verify that what we have in our student information system matches what is going on at the site and what they have, the students they have, the students that are transitioning, maybe if some are starting to transition back to their home districts and whatnot. Every month we do that to promote accuracy within our system. Average daily membership, ADM, is calculated as the total number of full days of enrollments, full-time equivalents of a student divided by the number of days in the year. So a student attending our program on a full-time 1 FTE or 6 hours a day for every day of the year will equal 1 ADM at the end of the year.
So as Ben mentioned, with our students coming in and out, that can vary and often doesn't equal, it isn't a one-to-one for us as an intermediate. Also, all of the numbers in this report reported as an ADM are projected out to the end of the year. So if the student is currently enrolled, we're assuming they will be enrolled the entire year, and the ADM is calculated out to that. The other numbers that exist in here are head count. And I always, when somebody asks me for head count, I always want to clarify, do you want all the students that have been enrolled in this month, or do you want the ones that are enrolled right now? And so head count in this report will be the students enrolled at the time the report was created, which is within the last week. Enrollment count, which exists for the NSO table in here, that is a count of all students that have enrolled in NSO, and you'll see in October, and then there's a projected at the end of the year. That's an enrollment count, whether they're still enrolled or not. Any questions?
Thank you for taking the time to explain that.
So Kim said one thing that I think is really important, and that is, again, this is just a snapshot where things are when we gathered this data. So what you see here in these different tables and throughout this report are probably wrong as of today because they've all changed. It's just a snapshot. It's a point in time. It's going to change. It certainly will change over time as we go through to the end of the year. So I'll start just by going through a few highlights of the report. At the bottom of page 2, our overall total enrollment. Again, this is a little tricky because we're combining lots of different things into this one table, right? So these are our federal setting 4 students here. These are our ALC Academy students, our parent treatment students, our Northern Star Online. Oh, sorry, this one does not include Northern Star Online and parent treatment. Some of the other ones that you'll see later in the trend graphs do include them. But anytime we start adding them all together, again, it gets complicated. I think the story here, though, and that we'll see, is especially when we look at the trend data that's later in the document, is that our enrollment is up this year over last year. If you look at the top of page 3, that's special education, federal setting 4 students, you'll see as a whole that right now we have 447.09 ADM. That's just under our projection of 458. So we're a little short there, but if you were to skip ahead to the last page and look at the number of referrals we've had between July and October, we've probably made that up. Most of them are accounted. We've had 89 referrals during that period of time. Most of them are counted here, but maybe not all of them. And so our total, like today, ADM is probably right about that projection, which I think is really a credit to our special education team in our district, our financial team in the district, because they're really close. And to take the amount of movement in and out of our district and be really close on their projections, it's good work because that's not easy to do. So I think we're really close to that projection. Those numbers in care and treatment, those are, again, very fluid numbers. If you think about the students that we serve in care and treatment, some of those students are with us for just a very short period of time. So just know that when you see that number, again, if you were to look at it in 2 weeks, that number may look very different. I'll jump to, I'll talk about the ALC Academies there in the middle of that page. And this is something that I think is a little bit of a bright star here, that we've been working for the last couple of years to improve the integrity of our programs in ALCs and do a lot of outreach to our member districts on our ALCs. And we feel that this is a sign that we're on the right track with the work that we're doing in our ALCs, that we have some more work to do, but seeing that we are up just over 16 over projections, we're taking that as a good sign of where we're going with our academies. On NSO at the bottom, Northern Star Online, I'll highlight the total numbers in the gray shaded area. Our students in NSO are coming in for a class or two, so we've served so far just under 4,000 unique students, but by the end of the year, we're likely to serve probably over that 7,000 students, unique students in our NSO programs by the end of the year. Kim just mentioned to me that although it may be 7,000 unique students, it's like 15,000 like unique enrollments
Yes.
that all have to be processed by SIS. The next two pages are the historical trends. I'm not going to go into all of this either, other than to say that total enrollment on the first bar graph, you'll see that that's up over last year in that picture that combines everything. And if you page through the next couple of graphs, you'll also see that the special education setting 4 is up, the ALCs are up, and NSO is up after we saw a dip, especially in NSO for COVID. Those numbers are coming back very strongly thanks to the leadership of David, John Voss, and others. The demographic information, these are the pie charts. You have it in front of you, but I'll say this as well. About 39% of our students are white, about 34% of our students are Black as a whole. About 61% of our students are students of color. Our free and reduced price lunch numbers, that shows about 50%. We're sure that that is an undercount, that after students receiving, all of our students receiving meals and not turning those forms back in as much, that that's likely a pretty significant undercount of the number of free and reduced price lunch students that we're serving. Member district enrollment is the second to last page. There you can see each of our member districts, your districts, broken down by the number of students. This is displayed as current headcount, not EDM. The number of students from your district that we're serving in our programs. Hope this is a helpful table to you if you've ever wondered about how many students from your district are we serving here in Intermediate District 287. And the last page is, I mentioned this already, this is the new federal setting 4 special education referrals that we've had from July 1st through October 10th. And you can see again there broken down by member district and the site at which they were placed or they will be placed. And that's 89 referrals between July and October. It's a fair amount of movement, and even probably our most stable group of students, ours federal setting 4, 90 students coming in, probably a good number leaving as well. That's a fair amount of movement. Again, why those projections being pretty close is fairly impressive. I mentioned that we plan to, this is our first run through this, and we got ourselves fairly organized. And we feel like we've got a decent start on this this report for you. I hope it was helpful, but we're open to feedback that you have on both the content, the layout, or questions that you have that are from the data in the report, or anything I missed.
Even the additional enrollments.
Ben and Kim, thank you so much. This is, I think, the first time that I recall seeing this information in this way at this point in the year, and I find it incredibly helpful. And I'm guessing there's going to be a good number of questions and comments coming your way here. So we'll see who wants to go first. Francesca.
First, I really appreciate how clear this was laid out. I like the table of contents. It's a lot of information, so much appreciation to everybody who went and not only gathered the information, but laid it out. And then, side note, I think the way the colors were chosen and everything is very helpful as well. On page 3, where it talks about Northern Star Online, I just want to make sure, like, I think I get it, but I just want to make sure. The bottom line for total enrollment count in the gray is 7,000. And then District 287 ALCIS, that's like the number of students, or that's the number of ADMs that number of students is producing. So it's 7,000 unique enrollment, well, unique students, but because some are just taking a course or 2 or 3 year ADM, is that the ADMs that's 97.5?
Answer, sorry. You have this answer, I can answer part of it, only because David just gave me this answer earlier. And that- and that is that the middle row there, those are mostly summer school. So IS is independent study, and those are mostly ADMs that were generated over the summer. And
So the 890 would be the ADMs.
It would be a combination.
Okay, because I was like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of unique students to get so few. Like, how do you have enough teachers? You cannot fund that. Thank you. I'm glad I asked. So it would be the 890, that's regular school year, and then the 97 would be like this summer. So it'd be like a little over 900 or so. Okay.
And again, it's an example of how this builds over time, so that we'll have, ADM in October, but we'll add to that over time to build towards that 890 that we're projecting by the end of the year, because more students will come in and take a few courses here and there over the course of the year.
So because this is connected to the funds you can receive, are you, from your funding sources, can you adjust these numbers throughout the year and then adjust what you get? Like the independent school districts can, they have like an October 3rd or whatever day it is, and they have but throughout the year, they can make some changes if they get a whole bunch of new students or if they lose a bunch. Are you able to do that as well?
Thank you for coming up to the mic, David.
Thank you.
They instructed me before.
It's a very confusing thing, so I really appreciate you answering it.
We're able to go up or down pretty fluidly throughout the year. And so like this year, the first two columns there are actual enrollments to date. And so we are up about 10-15% over last year. And so we have added some staff to help us with that load.
That's where I was gonna go next. If you have a sudden influx, can you get more money so you can have more? Okay.
Correct. And for us, we have to have that flexibility because we also don't get funded for every student that enrolls like a traditional school would.
Thank you.
Make sure you want to live. I want to wait a minute.
Close by.
Does that adjustment ability carry over to some of our ID 287 buildings like West Education Center and South Education Center? Does that flexibility exist there to adjust?
Like that one?
Come on up, Elizabeth.
Mhm.
Good evening, thank you. I'm Elizabeth Lodge Rogers, the Assistant Superintendent. What happens, we're not as flexible in our academies. We tend to, our projections are really important. And we just don't have quite the flexibility that we do in NSO, just by the structures. We usually start with the staffing and end with the same staffing at the year, regardless of where things go.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Again, I want to thank you for how clear you present things every single time, and your layouts. My question is, and the single point head count, with, since you had to gather it from so many places, was there like a time frame, like they were all done within a week, or is it scattered for like over a month, or the head count for one single day in the district?
So as I mentioned, our process is that SIS will print the reports for the site, send it out to the sites. It's about a week and a half long process between them reviewing it, submitting, changes to us getting that into the system. And there is a set day that I pull the data.
Okay.
And I base this head count on the current head count on that day.
One
So
day.
any student currently enrolled that
That
day.
day.
And it's around the 15th of every month. I try to get it as close to the 15th just to keep it consistently, every approximately 30 days.
Oh, has there been have you seen a lot of change in that snapshot time between September and October?
Between September and October, yes.
Okay.
There, because for us, we plan for students and then we enroll them. And then we expect, you know, them to show. There's also the 15-day
Sure.
drops. And so there's a significant change and a lot of cleanup that happens both at the beginning of the year and then again at the end of the year for sure. Those are busiest.
It'll just be interesting to see how it changes from month.
And we do have that from because I do it October, November, December, January, every month for all of these metrics.
Do you see a pattern at all? Generally, like over the years?
We see a pattern in, you know, we have some of the historical here that you can see overall. Throughout the year, there is a definite pattern by program for sure. Like NSO, for example, skyrockets. Special ed is fairly stable. And pathways, there's a jump after that, a slight jump after the second semester, because we have a lot of students that'll enroll for just the second semester that maybe weren't with us for the first semester.
What care and treatment? That one seems like it might be influential by the time of the year, et cetera.
Yeah, that one is very, I don't know, yeah.
I was kind of surprised that on the report that the care and treatment was under projection at that particular moment.
What happens is there tends to be a lull in referrals through the summer and the beginning of the school year, and there's a hope, right? I'll be honest, that kids can start the school year and see how it goes.
Okay.
Then we see October.
Yep.
And kind of builds, and then during holidays, we'll see a little bit of a decrease, trying to keep students home. And then right after the holidays, we tend to see it. Our special ed referrals kind of go that way too. September's a big month because it's move-ins or mostly move-ins, and then that kind of balances out the no-shows, you know, kids that end up not coming. And then it builds, and then by February, March, we see a big jump too, because by then we've
weeks
done
in
all those
process, yeah.
interventions, we've tried things, and at that point is, okay, let's do something different. So those are some of the patterns, and our academies, it'll be after break, kids aren't making progress maybe towards their graduation, the LCs, our academies, and we'll see that second semester, but of course by then they're a half a ADM, right? So even though the head count goes up, the ADMs don't go up quite at the same rate, and we're paid by tuition, ADM, right, or billing.
Thank you.
I would just ask, as a new person, and it seems like this is a fairly robust report, but it's not something that's been done this way before. Is that what I heard?
Correct.
The goal going forward, now that you have this as this one snapshot in October of 2022, what is the plan or expectation, and what frequency are you going to be providing from this baseline? We'll use this as a baseline. What are the things that happen from going forward?
Well, I'll say externally, our plan right now is to be back annually for the board. So we'd come back and do a similar report pending feedback and improvements to the report. Come back to this team annually. I know that Marcy shared with superintendents as well this report. Likely to also be shared with the Special Education Advisory Team, CDAC, and probably BDAC as well. And so those are our external stakeholders for this report. And then internally, Kim runs those monthly reports that she was talking about that will help us track this over time and making sure that we're on track with what we understand to be our students inside of our buildings programs.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
I was just going to add to that, when May does her monthly financials, there is an ADM graph and summary in those as well that's presented to the board,
Got it.
or
And then
at least within the packet.
And my second question, I'm not sure, given that you've shared this with other superintendents, I'm just curious as to, when you talk about NSO, that other districts, including the one that I represent, has been working on its own virtual pathways and things like that. And so on. Even though I see a very large number for my particular school district in there, there's stuff that's going on internally in our individual district. I'm just curious, how is that shared with 287 to have it impactful to your potential projections and things like that?
Thank you. One thing that's unique about NSO is NSO serves beyond our
Yes.
member districts. And so what we enter into conversations, and David will probably share too, is connecting with each of the districts. Some districts have, due to the pandemic, lifted up an online school or program and have then since waned off in its continued development. Other districts are continuing to work and develop their online school. And so we are, as a flexible serving district, we help and support and also know that we are capturing students. And David, maybe you can share how much is outside of, how many states do we support and outside of our member districts?
So it is mostly Minnesota students that we get. And most of the students that we get are from the metro. And about 30% of the students that we get come from districts that have their own online school. And there's various reasons for it. Either they don't offer the class, or they don't have enough students to run the class, or they just have a lot of students enrolling. And so I work at kind of the state level with MINOLA, Minnesota Online Learning Alliance, where the different providers talk and connect. And so I meet with Stephen Cullison a lot, and then I'll answer any questions that they have.
The reason why I bring it up is that I was in my own board meeting Tuesday night, and we were certainly talking about our pathway. And I just want to make sure from your guys' standpoint that you're getting enough information to where if there were changes that were going on, how it's going to impact your ability to manage that and go from that standpoint. I'd like to make sure there's two-way communication happening.
Yeah.
So there's no surprises from either side.
No, then that's what I think I'm very proud of with this team and the connection that you have with our member districts and just meeting with the superintendents. We talk about it, and it's not just online learning, it's also special education programming. Some districts are building their own transition programs or other programming. And so even today we talked about what would that look like, and then what do you need from us in programming that you are unable to support or serve or build at this time. So it is a real collaborative. We see ourselves an extension of you as a member districts, not in competition.
I had hoped that was the case. Thank you.
We'll confirm it.
That brings up a question that I have now. Based on the sheets that we have here, the enrollment for North Star Online, is that just for the member districts, or is that total ADM for? So here I'm talking about this North Star Online. It says 259.41. That's total enrollment.
Member district enrollment?
No, I'm looking at this North Star Online.
On
That's 259.41.
On the bottom of page 3?
Page 5.
And so that is the total enrollment for this year so far. And that is just the supplemental and contracted. That doesn't include the 287 IS. So the independent study credit recovery students.
And it's not just for member districts, it's for all students served in NSO, mostly, as David mentioned, in Minnesota, but not necessarily just in Minnesota.
So it's conflicting with, you have to go further down to the member district enrollment, just they're alone. It's over 500 in NSO. So I mean, these numbers seem conflicting. The page, I'm not sure what page number it is, but member district enrollment, the far right, you look at NSO, it totals over 500.
Yes, so the 259.41 is ADM. And the member district enrollment is head count, current head count. And it in NSO and the independent studies in particular, there's a lot of head count to get a smaller ADM.
Okay.
One thing I'll share, oh, Michelle, were you about to raise your hand?
No, I mean, I
Okay.
could. I
Nope,
have a
you don't need to.
question.
I have a question and a comment. The comment is, I think, like going through this and also just hearing the answers to these questions is such a helpful reminder of the complexity of our district and the degree to which we are responsive to so many factors and external forces, and yet we staff, we for member districts say we're going to take our kids and you're not going to have to wait, and like just honestly the mechanics of that kind of blows my mind in thinking about how all of this works. So I sort of just wanted to acknowledge that. A very, I think, simple question. In several of these data polls, it says that care and treatment and Northern Star Online are not included. Why is that?
Particularly in the ones where there's a projected column, because to try to project for Northern Star Online or care and treatment we just can't.
Okay.
Trying to project for them is more difficult. We do our best, but and also we can't break it down by grade either for those programs from a projection standpoint.
And then it's the demographics or the other areas where they're not included. Why do we not have that?
So a lot of, so care and treatment, do you want to speak to the care and treatment piece? Okay. As far as the NSO goes, not all NSO enrollments, particularly contracted and supplemental, are in Synergy, which is our student information system. And these demographics are from the data dashboard. And that data comes directly from Synergy. So we will be working as we start building out the data dashboard. We're working on a way to get care and treatment data and NSO data in. It's just more difficult because those data connections haven't been made yet to the other systems where that information exists.
I think it will be, and for sure, Elizabeth, come on up. I think that we will have care and treatment, at least as part of this as we go forward. It's just not something that we've been reporting out historically, but we can do that one, I think, a little bit easier, and that we intend to in the future. Anything to add?
I just had one more thing about the care and treatment. Because those students, oftentimes they come and they're gone in a day or two.
Yeah.
And by the time we get all of the pieces we need to get them into a student information and get them enrolled, they have already left. So we do a lot of things behind the scenes to make sure that they have access to instruction right away, even though they might not be in our system yet. So there's a lag there as well.
And that's, we basically have to kind of run a dual system for that enrollment. And I know we've talked about care and treatment a lot. Some students are there 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 days. Then there's some students that are there 2 weeks, and there's some students that are there 4 months, and then maybe 6 months now. So we have this range, and so there's a lot of in and out. So Kim and Ben and their team that are working with our dashboard are trying to help us get that just a little more, little easier to take the data that we're working with every single day in care and treatment into our Synergy system. It's still a little rocky, particularly with our hospital-based programs, because that's where there's that big turnaround.
I'll just add here as well that sometimes when we were building this report, that we made the decision to leave out certain programs because it might inflate the data and misrepresent what we're trying to represent. So in the case of NSO, because it's a large number of ADMs, sometimes we've left that out because it would really skew the message that we're trying to communicate on, like the ADM on that very first table. So some of those decisions we just kind of felt our way through as we were trying to create this first report.
Miss anybody? Questions or comments? There, go ahead.
Thank you for this. I think if I put on my my relatively new person hat, just trying to get a feel for who comes in and how it comes in. I'm sure number crunching took a lot of your time and pulling together, but it's a really helpful document. So thank you.
Right, thank you. And a special thanks to David and Elizabeth for being willing to come on up and answer some questions of ours as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to move on to our business services and labor relations report. And first up is the facilities report, which this evening is the facilities department annual board report, which is going to be presented by May Hopkins, our executive director of business services.
And I'm gonna give Juanine a minute to
Yep.
pop up the presentation. She's working on that. Good evening, Chair Brackey, board members and district administrators. I am happy to bring you the 2022 Facilities Department Annual Report. This report is a summary highlighting some of the work that the Facilities Department has or is doing at 287. And the report, if you saw it in board book, while the pictures are great, I strongly encourage and welcome you to visit our sites and see our wonderful schools and facilities teams in action. So this is our cover page. I selected this photo on purpose. So many of you probably are like, what room is that? I've never seen that room. This is actually the mechanical room at North Education Center, right? So it doesn't actually show up on a lot of tours. It's not classroom, right? So folks don't actually get to see there is a lot to keep the building running. So our learning intentions for this evening is that the board will have a better understanding of the projects that were completed last spring and summer, the projects that are completed this year or are in progress right now. We'll have an update on our solar project and then what projects are planned for next summer, 2023. And then what the strategic priorities work that the facilities department has been doing. So we're going to start with our district service center, the building we're standing in right now. So the big thing that happened here at the district service center was related to our trees. And unfortunately, this is a before picture. And unfortunately, our trees along, I just lost the name of the street out front, Water Tower Circle, were ash trees and they had emerald ash borer and they couldn't be remedied in any other way other than to remove them. We also removed in our parking lot, there were trees in our islands and that were dead, right? And so while they were out here, we had them remove those as well. So at South Education Center, to accommodate the needs of students, we needed to enlarge a restroom in our A wing. And to do that, we removed an interior wall from a small sensory room next to the restroom and remove the door. So here's our before, where it's kind of two rooms. And then here is our new large restroom. At West Education Center, we found that we were having some foundational issues due to water. So the water was flowing toward the building and not away from the building. So we did some tree removal, we did some grading of land, and some concrete repair that needed to be done related to those issues. So this is the landscaping and concrete work after. And here's some other pictures of the other entries. So now you can clearly see in that, especially that grassy picture, how it slopes away from the building. Also in West Education Center, we needed to replace the wall framework around a couple of our doors over time with student use of some of our doors. The frames actually have become loose at the bottom, the steel frames where they connect into the steel frames at the doors. So we tore apart the areas around the doors and replaced the frames, the beams, as you will. And then we also added new locks to these doors. And that was a safety hazard because with the weakened parts around the door, students were able to wiggle the door who didn't belong in the classroom, right, and get into the classroom. And then also at West Education Center, we replaced the sign out front. So with the challenging permitting process and with the city, we finally got the permit. This sign was actually taken out by a vehicle a while ago, and we had to put a new sign in place.
Sounds very like something that happens in Minnesota. I feel like everywhere we go, there's a mailbox or sign that was taken out.
Yeah. So, then at West Education also, we began our roof restoration process there this last summer. So, this was completed this last summer. The area, now I gotta remember, the flag denotes the area between the two. The white area is the new roof, and the dark area is the roof that still needs to be restored, that we'll talk about in a little bit. At North Education Center, we created some additional individualized spaces for students by, hang on. We converted by adding partitions to walls to create new spaces. At Ann Bremer Education Center, this was the concrete that's away from the building along the edge of the parking lot. This did not get replaced or restored when we did the big 2017 Ann Bremer work. And so we replaced it because it was wow, I really went. Because it was becoming a trip hazard, you can see the cracks in there. We repaired that and replaced it, and here's the app. I lightly touch the button. So then we're on to our solar update. So this is an aerial picture of our Ann Bremer Education Center with our final solar layout. The Ann Bremer Education Center was one of our more challenging sites because there is a substantial amount of work. So equipment that actually has to go on the ground outside of the building. As you can see, we have a very small blueprint or area around this building. So if you can see that little red square toward the bottom of the parking lot, that's where the outside equipment was gonna go or is gonna go, right? So there was a lot of extensive planning. There's only so many feet that the equipment can be from the solar array and from the electrical inlet. And so, but we also needed to make sure it was safe for our students. So we will be fencing in that equipment there. So there was a lot of planning that had to happen for that. You may also wonder, well, we haven't covered all the roof at Ann Bremer with solar panels. Why is that? This is the maximum number of panels we can have at this site. The district can't create a system that produces more electricity than the building needs at 100%. So you can only produce 100% of the building's need. So it's got more roof, which is good. Gave us lots of layout options on the roof. The next site we'll be working with here is the district service center. So you can see that there's only panels on half the district service center. That's because the other half of the roof is scheduled for restoration in the summer of 2023. And then the last item we have here is North Education Center. So the North Education Center layout, this is the maximum layout we can do. It will not meet the full 100% electrical usage of NEC, but it comes close. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the overall process. So there's a big design process that includes a structural design process and an electrical design process, working with the electrical company, getting everything, all the blueprints and all of that. So most of that is now complete, and we're starting to head into being scheduled for the construction process. We have been informed that that will not be until 2023. So we're hoping, right now we're looking at, okay, where do we put the dumpsters? Where do we put these things? When they do come, they're gonna need cranes, put the stuff up on the roof, right? So we're working all of that out right now so that in 2023, we can get the panels on the roof, and by next summer, when we have lots of sun again, We'll be generating most of our own electricity. I did want to let you know that West Education Center is on hold because the roof did not meet the structural load requirements to put solar on the roof. So we'll be bringing in our own structural engineer to review and determine what scope and feasibility for that project, right? And then, let's see. So for our future planned projects, so you've heard a lot about the 2022 long-term facilities maintenance bond. So these are the projects that are scheduled for year one. And that would be the phase 2 for the West Education Center roof and the DSC roof that we just spoke about. Both of those are currently being advertised for bids, right? And the goal is those bids will come to the board in December. SEC LED lighting and control system, we are starting the vendor selection process for that. And then the other project in the first year is the district service center elevator system. And we're working on setting up meetings with vendors. And then in the longer term, there are projects scheduled for years 2 and 3. And this is a list of those projects, and we'll talk more about those in the future. So as part of my finance report in the future, you will have a construction project, right? And you'll have like what's been spent and where's the funding left and how are we investing it? And that will be added to the financial report. And then I just wanted to do a quick update on our facilities team who is working on our strategic priorities, just like everyone in the district, right? So they are a big part of making sure that our buildings are clean and well maintained, right? And there's all kinds of studies that link well-maintained buildings to feelings of staff and student safety and staff and student wellness, and how they increase attendance for both. And then we are still doing pandemic safety precautions. We have infectious disease training, sanitizing, additional cleaning of touch points, and we still have signage as well. And then our facilities and food services teams are in a racial equity team together, and they had monthly meetings starting in August. And for the 22-23 school year, they'll have monthly activities or meetings. And that's already started. The goals for those meetings are that staff will have increased their knowledge and understanding of biases in racial equity, and that they will understand microaggressions and their impact on the workplace and workplace culture and how to interrupt and stop them. So a big thank you to our facilities team. I handed these around, so you could please sign one of those for each of the buildings, and then I will make sure that those get posted in the facilities offices at each of our sites. And a big thank you to the school board. So none of this work could happen without your support. And so we are grateful and thankful for your support. And at this point, we'll have open the floor to questions and let you know that we do have Kurt Vandenberg, our senior manager of facilities, online. If there's a question I can't answer.
Great. Thank you, May. And hello, Kurt. Thanks for hanging with us this far in the meeting. Questions or comments for May and Kurt? Michelle.
This brings nostalgia back when we used to, as a board, we had a committee, the facilities committee, that oversaw what we just did today, for example. But it was fun getting to learn all the terminology, but I'm really impressed how far we've come. You guys are just great.
Thank you, Michelle. So we had facilities committees when we were constructing schools. So when you constructed North and when you constructed SEC, there was a board facilities committee.
And SEC was the first one.
Yeah.
And we're quite out there. Right.
Hey, I was wondering about the scheduled roof restoration for WEC for West. Is that going to allow you to then consider doing the solar on West?
The solar on West is a structural issue. So right now, they're saying there isn't structural capacity for the roof to hold anything more than what's already on the roof.
Even with the restoration?
Even with the restoration is kind of like parking lot restoration,
Surface.
right? It's just a surface restoration so that water doesn't penetrate your roof. It doesn't change the weight that's on your roof, and it doesn't change the structure that's supporting your roof.
A few questions regarding the solar panel projects. So Heidi asked me one already for me actually. But then Route South Education Center, are they in the same boat or?
So
that gets
South
subsidized?
Education Center, if you looked on the year 2 and 3, which I kind of skipped over that list, South Education will be having a roof replacement in year 2 of our LTFM bond. And so until that roof replacement happens, we haven't entered into any phase of solar for South Education Center because we're going to replace the entire roof.
So then theoretically though, once the roof is replaced, will that roof be able to withstand more weight with solar panels?
So South Education Center, they haven't done any sort of design or
Okay.
any sort of solar analysis for it because we knew that we would have this roof replacement, right? So you don't want to put a solar panel on and then have to, or a solar array, right? And then have to take the solar array off in 2 years, right? And bring cranes in and things, and then do your roof replacement and then put your solar array back, right? You want a good roof and then you put your solar array on.
I think the question is that we're gonna explore it once the new. roof-
Yes.
Okay.
I don't anticipate any structural issues for South Education Center.
Okay, good. I know, because we're talking a lot about it in Robbinsdale, and I know one thing that we talked about too was, if your roofs can't handle the additional weight, talked about doing it over the parking lots. So it'd be, kind of, protected or, covered parking lots and then, create shade and protect vehicles and, right there above parking lots, it's pretty, it would take up a whole lot more space, but just for thought.
I know, my concern with that would be WEC is already built into the ground. If I shade the parking lot, there'll be not a lot of light coming into that particular school. But it's an idea and it's a thought, and so we can brainstorm some other ideas. But first, we'll see if it's feasible to shore up and provide more structure for the roof.
Right. Last question, this is probably for the superintendent. With this, being built or be completed by next year, is there any discussion about including like our curriculum? They've talked about solar panels being built and put on the schools and being a part of curriculum to teach kids, students.
Yeah, so I'll pop back to, so we did do a presentation and there is a curriculum that comes along with the solar panels, right? And a whole, like, kind of computer program kind of thing that will like tracks the amount of energy and things like that that teachers can tap into and add to their science curriculum if they wish.
Yeah, so we anticipate accessing and tapping into that.
Very good.
Thank you for putting everything together. One of the things I wanted to ask about, because it was something that Eden Prairie had done, and I didn't know if it was an option here, is invest in a solar farm where I don't know all the details, but it's something that, they did, and it helps to offset the electricity use. And it's, it's share you purchase into kind of, and then you get a portion of the energy equivalent to the portion you've invested into.
Like, I'll talk to Jason.
Yeah, depending on what it
If
would
I can't,
cost.
if I can't put if I can't put panels on WEC,
Depending what it would
there's
cost
another
to-
option.
to
Yeah.
put up supports for that roof, or
Yeah.
if it's even possible, it might be another option.
Yeah.
And then if you did do covered parking anywhere, another idea, I don't know how this would fly, but covered parking when it's a very snowy day is a premium, there could always premium parking fees.
Car charging stations.
I don't know if a solar panel would charge a card. I don't know if they get that much.
Yeah, they do. There's.
I can do that.
Yep, they're starting to build them all over the place.
Sarah.
Thanks. Just a quick question. You said that the solar projects would start in 2023. Can that happen while students are in session, or will we have to wait till summer of 2023 because the students need to be out of the buildings to install them?
So that's part of the discussion that we're having about crane placement and dumpster placement. So what we're looking at is it will only take a couple of days to get everything up on the roof. So they're looking at like a building like NEC where there's a lot, that they would probably do that on a weekend. Right, so those are the discussions that we're having now about how do we work around so that we're not interrupting, we're not blocking bus lanes, right? And those sort of things. So yeah.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you.
When they did it at our school, they did it like over MEA. You know, and then they're up on the roof for a while. So they used that as a part of the curriculum. It's talking about how they would be installed and all that jazz. It's pretty cool. And they do use it, the curriculum for solar panels at my school. We teach.
Any other questions or comments? Right, it's especially exciting to see the solar plans and to hear about the ways in which our kids will be brought into the process. So thank you for that. May gets to stay for our next item on the agenda, which is approval of our routine monthly finance report.
All right, so thank you, Chair Brackey. So this is the end of a quarter. So here I am in person giving the financial report. So this is September 2022's monthly report. Quick reminder that the June amounts shown on these monthly reports are mostly on a cash basis and that those amounts will change as the accrual entries are entered at the end of the year up and through the audit, and that also the July 2022 amounts will also change as the accrual entries are reversed. So as of the end of September, our revenues were at 30.1% of budget. That is below the last couple of years. There was a 4% increase in our total revenue budget. And our expenditures were at 15% of budget, which is very close to the percentages for the last 2 years. Our cash balance was very similar to the last 2 years' balances. As a matter of fact, I challenge you to figure out which year is which on there. And then our investments totaled $24,871,366.47 and earned interest of $31,896.83. The student ADM, as you just heard, was provided in a separate report. Donations for the month of September totaled 3,120, including one three-wheel trike and $1,020 in cash donations. Are there any questions before the board approves the September report?
Don't see any. So with that, we could entertain a motion to approve the September 2022 monthly finance report.
Second.
We have a motion by Sam Fint and a second by Michael Birdman. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the motion passes. Thank you, May. We move into the board business section of the agenda, and first up is under policy review and revision, the policy bucket related to board officers and operations. And so Ann Becker, our Executive Director of Human Resources and Legal Services, will join us at the mic. And before she even starts, I just noticed, and so I want to apologize that I didn't catch this sooner. Ann wrote a memo that explains sort of the overarching, like what these policies are, the revisions that have been proposed. But it's actually the first link in the routine monthly finance report agenda item. So knowing that you might not have seen it because that's where it's located, Anna's just going to do a brief overview. And again, because this is the first read, we're not taking action this evening regardless, but just wanted to sort of point you to that's where it is if you'd like to follow along.
Thank you. All right, so I just thought I'd highlight the substantive changes because I know you didn't have a lot of time with this memo, and for that I apologize. And if there are any questions, please let me know. So the first policy was the goals policies, BOO 100, and the only substantive change was to update the mission statement to our current statement. Then we moved to BOO 120, board superintendent relations. And as I noted, I changed the language regarding the superintendent's obligation with regard to implementing board policies, just to move away from to the best of his or her ability to actually implementing them with fidelity. I added a little more information about the superintendent's authority with regard to personnel matters in the next change. And deleted information that was already in the bylaws or another policy in the same policy bucket. Boo 140 compensation, there were no substantive changes. Implementation of board policy, Boo 160. As I mentioned, it was probably rescinded at an earlier time because it was not on the website. And it was probably rescinded because the information that is in it is actually largely contained in Boo 200, which is policy development, adoption, implementation, and review. Then we move to out-of-state travel by board members, Boo 180. I propose changing the district policies that board members need to have sufficient knowledge to comply with from those that relate to their role as board members to all policies. And I did that simply because policymaking is such an important role of the board. We try to keep our policies to a minimum, to just those that are either required by law or are very, very important to the board's vision for the district. Then there was a revision to reflect the practice that all district paid travel by board members is pre-approved by the board. And to address the issue of spending taxpayer funds for a public purpose. We noticed that in some other policies, this part about sharing the information that is learned at district paid conferences and things is a good way to demonstrate that the funds were used for that purpose. Then we get to policy development, adoption, implementation, and review. And there's an expansion on the phrase relevant parties, just to more clearly define who we're talking about when we want to get input on policy revision and adoption. And clarification of the board's role with regard to administrative procedures. Boo 220, board structure and decision-making is also proposed for deletion because the information is elsewhere in other policies. And the last two, which are the conflict of interest, Boo 240 policy and the board bylaws, there were no proposed changes.
Thank you so much for walking us through all of that. Much appreciated. And again, knowing that this is the first read, are there any just initial comments or questions that people have? Go ahead, June.
I just had a question about 180, the out-of-state travel, the proposed change. I'm just wondering, just to get some clarity, by changing that language, does that then make the board at all more or less legally responsible for the implementation and or policy enactment that could happen?
Which change are you referring to?
The that they need to have sufficient knowledge to comply with district I guess you're changing it to all district policies instead of the ones that relate to our role as board members.
Yes. I'm just trying to read the tiny version of the policy that is on my computer.
The way that I interpret it, if it's helpful, is that bar has to be met in order for the out-of-state travel to even be considered. Not that it's casting anything specific about the level of knowledge of board members in general. Is that where your question's coming in?
Yeah, I was just wondering because I think that, and I'm not saying board members should not be aware of all of our policies by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm just saying that I'm wondering if changing language in the policy then makes board members responsible at a much higher level for the policies, knowledge of those policies and how they're being implemented / enacted. That if there's any sort of
So
more onus on us as board members.
I don't believe so because it talks about sufficient knowledge to comply with the policies. And in most cases, it isn't a matter of the board members having to comply with the policy. It's more that because you're operating under a policy governance model, you would want to know more or less what the policies say. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yep, just
Okay.
wondering if it changed kind of like our legal or ethical standards of operation.
No, I don't believe so. And I think it actually increases your protection in a sense, because if there are policies with which board members need to comply, you're gonna need to have a good understanding of them.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a general question regarding all these, and is what brought on all these changes, or, I mean, is this updating the language, or what?
This particular bucket
all-
of policies.
Yeah, all of them.
Yeah, was due for review in October of 2022. So that's what led to the complete review of all policies. We're on a policy review schedule that rotates about every 3 years or so.
That's understandable. I think though, being that these are policies regarding us as a board, I feel that there should have been a subcommittee of board members then to also be part of this. You know, in these changes.
I have to say that does strike me as something that I also feel similarly about, although I didn't know how to phrase it. Just because my experience, you know, at ISD 272, we the board works out policies and wording, and there's a board committee that's a policy committee. And so any changes that come up in board discussion get sent to the policy committee. They then work on it. There are potentially times when legal would be consulted, but wording of the policies come from the board itself. So I have not done any review of policies here before, so I think, you know, every place does it different, but it does strike me as a little different that the wording is coming from an employee of the district instead of from board members.
I think this is a good example of how our 11 districts just operate in different ways, because this is really consistent to how my home district operates. In fact, it would be this exact same process where proposed language comes to us, we have multiple reads, we get to make requests, we get to talk about it as a full board before any changes are made. So I believe this is the way that 287 has historically operated around all policy changes.
At least since 2006, yes.
Yeah. Then how does the board make policy that governs the district?
Through what we're doing right here, which is the policies come to us on a predetermined cycle or as needed, like the examples of the COVID-related policies that come to us sort of on demand. And we go through the iterative process of reviewing, looking at changes that have been suggested by staff and saying, we agree with them, we do not. Have we thought about this? I know there have been examples over the years where I've said, actually, I'm not really comfortable with that language, and so then it was changed as a result. So I think it's a different way of doing it. And so I think it's both good to say, here's how we do it in different districts, and also be mindful of the way that 287 has historically operated. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, to reiterate, we don't get involved in the day-to-day operations of the school district. We don't in our own home districts either. So when policies come up, we get changes, brought to by the administration, and we review it and approve it. I get it.
Yeah.
This is involving governing us as a board. So that I am not happy with, and that a subcommittee should have been included to discuss these changes. as being that this is board governance and policies that affect us directly, we should have been able to say as a whole board or a committee, whatever way we have decided to be able to write some of this language.
Okay, my response to that is we still have the opportunity as board members to weigh in. It's just happening in a different way.
But I feel the amount of time we have to weigh in now is very different than if we had been at the table working through this. You know, if we sit and we create a mural from scratch together, we're going to come up with something different than if someone else makes it and then we come in after. So what do you think of this?
Sure.
And so I think it's a different process. And I think
Michael, I know you wanted to speak as well.
Can I just, so this is, I feel like what we do in Hopkins is a meld of maybe what you do and what's happening right here. And one of the pieces though that perhaps hasn't been uncovered because we don't know what the policy development process is in 287, because many of us are very new to the board, is that most of our policies are either, as you stated, based on state statute, and we can make very little changes, sometimes to our consternation, and through MSBA model policies. Is that the case with District 287? Because we just went through our 200 series bucket of policies on our monitoring committee, and it looks like the wording is very similar, and our 200 policies are based off of MSBA model policies. And in those, we have a lot of discretion as a monitoring committee and a board to make changes. So is that the process that has happened in 287, or are these things that were written from scratch by a board 20 years ago?
No, every time the policies are reviewed, they are compared to the MSBA policies. And so often they are very similar. In some cases, because of the nature of this district being so different from K-12s, they are, you will find significant differences in the policies from the MSBA ones, but often they're quite similar.
And in particular, maybe because these are board focused policies, and it's pretty standard across the state to adopt MSBA model policies.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Michael, and then Ruthie.
What I was going to say was that maybe the opportunity is for administration and the chair perhaps to come up with, here is the policy development process, the cadence, the schedule, the process that's in there. And then ultimately, when you talk about this is our first chance of looking at it, and you mentioned there's multiple, but we're not being specific, what are the specifics? So here's our first chance to say, here are the ones that are up for review. Here's what the language is. Here's proposed based off of the regulations and updates as we've been told. And then here's the opportunities to kind of go from that standpoint. While Edina does definitely do it the way some of the other colleagues talked about, I also see that development is also done because it's more than just these. There's just a lot of other things that are happening with that. I don't necessarily have a problem with this particular process, even though it's different than the one I'm used to, but I think it would be helpful first to establish that, and then secondarily make that part of any new board members orientation and brought on, so it's clearly established that's what that is. I think that could help alleviate some of what I'm hearing.
Totally agree. Appreciate all of that.
I agree. I've been there since January, and I had no idea that this is how it was done.
Ruthie has been waiting, so I want to go to her, but we have reviewed policies since then. Go ahead.
We do have, what's the process for reviewing policy?
No, sorry, I was just responding. There have been a number of policies that have come to us since January as a board. So sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just wondering, in Brooklyn Center, we have a policy committee. And has this district ever tried having a policy committee made up of board members? Or you just took it on when you came on board? I was just wondering what the experience has been like.
I believe that back when the 287 board was made up of 26 members, 2 from each member district. At the time, we had 13 member districts. There were several committees, and one of them may have been a policy committee. I know we had an HR committee, a facilities committee. I don't know if you remember, Michelle, if there was also a policy committee?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, we found it necessary to cut it way down because we had a lot of procedures playing the role of a policy. And that made a huge difference. Also, it made it much easier for the board members. And again, we're a different animal. I mean, we operate very differently. I think so far it's worked very well to have the person with the legal knowledge. Because I mean, as long as I've been here, I would have to go to Anne to say, hey, I need some help here on if I were in a committee. And the whole committee thing was people were being paid
by the meeting.
By meeting, and it became a problem.
Sure.
Well, I'm just thinking it's good for collaboration. If staff can work with board members, on that committee. So whatever resources you have the staff there, and you also have the voice of the board, because our responsibility is governing. And so it sort of takes away, to me, from the governing role, our governing role, by not being involved in that critical piece. And the staff is helpful because they are the resource people. They are the people with the knowledge. But I think working together helps us, to strengthen that relationship. Because really, we're going to have to refer back to the staff anyway for changes and different histories of what should be done within the policy. But we have to okay it, we have some kind of input. So I'm wondering, is that worth trying, or should we look at as a board, trying the effort of coming together in collaboration?
Can I ask a clarifying question that I think will also help us get to this? Because this is just part of the traditional historical review cycle, there is no rush to approve this particular bucket, right?
That's absolutely right.
So I think we can take the time to say, how do we want to do it in a way that people are comfortable with, acknowledging that I think, Michael, your point and your point, Ruthie, like really good ones, which is actually, let's make sure we have a consistent approach, period. And then think about, especially because these are policies that govern how we as a board operate, is there an additional layer that we should take into consideration? And then let's make sure that like we're just comfortable with that, and then we can proceed with, because there's no urgency in addressing these policies at this moment in time, right?
That's
Okay.
right. Can I just add two
Please.
more pieces of information? The other piece of history that I know is that so there was a policy committee, but for whatever reason, in 2006, before I worked for the district, I was brought in to overhaul all of the policies. And that is something that I did in the same way that we're doing now. In other words, I made suggested changes, brought them to the board considered them. And it certainly doesn't have to continue to operate that way, but that's what the policy committee ended up deciding they wanted to do once the board adopted the policy governance model. They just wanted a complete overhaul of everything. The other thing I'd say is that if board members are wondering about the process for adoption and revision of policies, et cetera, if you take a look at, let's see, BOO 200, Policy Development, Adoption, Implementation, and Review, you'll get a lot of great information from that policy.
So we'll start there as we figure out where we want to go from here. And the history, I just want to appreciate Michelle and Anne in particular for just the context that you're able to bring from the years past, because that is important and it's helpful. And I think we're often lacking it. Michelle, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I mean, often in the past, when we had policies or some other things that we needed to discuss, we'd have a workshop. There's nothing stopping us from being together, hashing things out. But I still think when you have it policy for review, you review it, but you bring it to us and we have final say on all of them. So I don't know, maybe we try a board workshop.
Sarah? Yeah, so this has been a great discussion. Has it been in the, I feel like in the, since I've been here in January, when we've seen the policies, we've seen them for review, we've read them in our packet in preparation. And I think I've sort of assumed that as a board member, if I had questions or suggestions or wanted to know how it was happening, that I would have just sent an email to the chair and to Anne and to the superintendent to ask some questions or propose some language or something, and then administration would consider that, and that would then come back potentially in these policies. Okay.
I think that is
Absolutely.
how
Mhm.
the board and district here at 287 has traditionally operated.
Okay, thank you.
So the only meetings that I've been at with policy were the COVID policies, and I took the wording being given to us a lot because of the crisis nature and how serious it was for the health of our students. I did miss a meeting during the Eden Prairie spring break because my family was not in Minnesota. And so if something else was covered then, I wasn't there for that one. But the only policies I've seen were the COVID ones. And while I do appreciate, of course, we would definitely have to have legal involved because of the fact that these policies have to meet the state law as well as the unique needs of the population the district serves. If we're looking at this from, an equity lens on many levels, I think that there is a very different process of collaboration with board members versus this process. And I'm not criticizing this process for how well it's worked in the past, but I don't identify as the majority of this board. And I do not think that my experiences when I move through the world are the same as many of the people in this room. And so if I'm going to be told, well, here's your policies, what do you want to do with it? For me to have to speak up, which I do, but it's not always so easy, that is a burden. And I would rather have been involved in the process to begin with than to be told at the end. I think it's a harder process if you give a finished product, even though you're saying it's not finished, it's put together, the wording's there. For me to have to then say, oh, here's a problem with this, or here's a concern. Whereas if we were collaboratively doing it together from the beginning, there could have been input from then on. And I think this is a different process. And I think it's an extra burden for a person who has different sets of experiences. I know when we talk about our students, we talk about our staff, we want to use that model. I think we could use the race equity model when we're looking at this as well. Who does it serve to have the process done this way best? And who might it not serve as well? And I feel that it would not serve me as well.
Thank you, Fran.
Is there a procedure attached to 200?
That I recall, but take a look.
And does it make a difference to people if it's developing policy versus reviewing policy? Just a question to put out.
Ruthie, was there something else you were going to share?
Oh, I was just thinking as the discussion was continuing, do we use the racial equity analysis tool on this particular word? It seemed like it would be a ideal area to use it on.
Absolutely.
Yes, the board has requested that tool be used, as well as gathering input from those constituencies that are affected by the policies. For example, student rights and responsibilities, we would of course be working with students and staff working with the students to get input on them.
But you haven't started yet using it.
No, we have used
You
it.
are using it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just that when it comes to board officers and operations, you're the constituency primarily. It's a little easier to see who to get input from beyond just the board when you're talking about employee policies or student policies or whatever it might be, data privacy, that kind of thing.
Which I think is bringing up really good, thoughtful issues around when the policies are about us. What does that mean for us and for having all of our voices in many different ways be reflected in the process? So I think that there's been some really important and necessary conversations. So thank you. And we'll pause on this bucket and determine how do we do some of the things that we've started to talk about here, and how do we make sure that everybody feels involved as we start taking this, and that it feels a little bit less like here's something that we're bringing to you and telling, but more collaborative and collective. Thank you. Thank you, Anne.
Absolutely. And in answer to your question, there is no procedure attached.
Because the development is kind of vague. The policy part of the development of policy is a little vague. Like there's no procedure of, because I've asked, can we do a gender inclusion policy? What do I need to do? Tell you. And then nothing's happened since then. That's onus partly on me for not following up on that. But there's no like procedure for that. Do you know what I'm saying?
It's not that nothing has happened on the gender inclusion policy since you brought it up. I gave an update last spring that Radius and I had put together a group of staff people. And that we were getting the assistance of the Great Lakes Equity Center, as well as Outfront Minnesota. And that this year we would be concentrating on getting more staff input and student input as well. So it's been stalled a tiny bit this fall because Radius left, and I've been waiting for our new director of equity to be onboarded so that we could once again start working with the group.
I apologize for
that. Okay.
No problem.
There's more hands over here. So Ruthie and then Shannon.
I was just thinking, is it an orientation process for going over all of these policies and all? So you received one?
I did an orientation. I think Francesca and I did together with Andy and
And then there was just one for Michael, what, in August?
Oh, good.
Yeah. So it's probably also maybe even looks a little bit different than the one in January. But yes. Yes, and I think there's good issues that have been brought up about ways in which policy could be a clearer part of it as well.
Just a quick general thing with policy review that that I think is important. In particular, you mentioned a gender inclusion policy. As we've been reviewing all of our policies in Hopkins, we're making all of our language gender neutral as we go through them. And so I appreciated seeing that you changed the his or her best ability to with fidelity. But if there could be an eye to making those kinds of changes as policies are being reviewed, that would be great.
Yes, I absolutely have been looking for that.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Much, much more to come. And we'll be looking for leadership from the full board on how we proceed. All right. So with that, the next item is just the traditional AMSD report. So I would just share the next full AMSD meeting is Friday, November 4th. The guest speakers are going to report on the current status of and progress being made on the Together We Make a Difference initiative, which is what the name is of the various people who are trying to work on some of the racial harm events that have taken place specifically at sporting events. So it's the State High School League. It's being led by folks through Paula Forbes and her organization. And so there's going to be an update on what's taking place there if that is of interest to you. In the various calendars that are in the board packet, the one thing I would share is the next Get on the Bus is Tuesday, December 6th at the North Education Center. So please let Juanine know if you are able to attend, and please do invite folks from your home district who you think might benefit from a really great experience at our North Education Center programs. And I know last week while I was out of town, there was a Get on the Bus. So I'm hoping that we might hear a little bit about it from folks who were able to participate as we move now into what's around the table.
Was that the care and treatment Get on the Bus, and it was, as always, extremely high level. It's just, you know, I always am struck by the passion and commitment of our staff, but in particular, I think this in that unit that is quite remarkable what they're doing there. Just the energy that they put into their work, and you know, I think until I was in the facility, I really had no idea what that involved, what was even going on in it, something like that. And I think a lot of people have no idea that that even exists. So it was extremely educational, helpful. I appreciate the opportunity to get to do that.
Ditto. Yeah, it was really quite unusual. And having never been inside the building, I was really struck how well thought out it was for the students. It was all about making the students feel comfortable at home. And I just keep thinking about the story of the 5-year-old child who was helped. But I thought, 5 years old, that's hard. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, I think I've been thinking about, I also was there and thought it was phenomenal. And I keep thinking of our 287 students that were doing poetry for us in sign language. And, you know, even just the courage of these young women to allow a whole bunch of grown-ups to walk into their classroom and watch them do that. And they were, as they're working through so many things we know. And so I'm just extra appreciative for being welcomed in that space. And trusted in the space to be able to be with our students. So thank you.
I think I would just add, one of the things that was most impressive to me amongst all things that were just said, those are all top things, was that at the end, when we were with the principal and the assistant principal of the care and treatment group, how they talked about that every day, right? It's an adaptation. What am I going to get today? And I'm hungry for it, and I'm going to go solve a problem today because I don't know what it's going to be. So when I hear a presentation earlier about, well, it's kind of hard to sort of say something about care and treatments, ADM and all this kind of stuff. So like you're talking about the actual work that's being done in those moments. I remember when I came home, and then when I was talking amongst my own community people, when I said this is the experience that I had, it's like, I hope this is not meant to be hyperbole. When I think now of the definition of what saints are, this is the living embodiment every day doing that. And the last thing I would say is that when we were taking the tour, and I want to point this out for Sarah, we were all feeling the potential experience of trauma that a child would have in entering into that facility, and the fear and the things that happen and the anxiety that might not only be for the child, but for the family, if there's a family associated with that. But Sarah then made a wonderful observation that really helped set the right tone. She's like, right, but there's also families who've been waiting for a spot and they haven't had one for 60 days. And this finally happened. So they're like, the sky has finally opened up, an array of sunlight has come in. And I thought that that was just a wonderful thing to bring the full inclusive narrative around that, which set the whole tone for the rest of that tour. So I just wanted to appreciate that.
Thank you. And certainly, if there are other things that people would like to share with your fellow board members, that's what Once Around the Table is for. I just wanted to get a few Get on the Bus tidbits for selfish reasons. I have a very silly one, but I saw our students at Ambulay. Like, because I thought I knew where Ambulay was, but I really wasn't sure that I knew Ambulay was. And we have a family member that lives over there. And so we were coming home from the orchestra on Friday night. And I was like,
And so we turned by and I was like, where is there, do you know, is there a group facility or something? She's like, yeah, it's right there. And then like a ray of sunshine, there's a group of our students doing like cooperative games out in the parking lot under the lights, and they all looked happy. So it was, I have a Friday night report that all was well at Opry for that minute.
Anything else? I didn't share before because I wanted to wait to get more information, but several weeks ago, I think first Friday of the month, there was a lockdown at Eden Prairie that made the news. You may have heard about it. And, you know, there was something that came up, some messaging from one student to another, and it was very concerning. And so the building high school had what they call a soft lockdown. So the students stayed in rooms and the doors were all locked. And in some rooms, they continued learning. In some rooms, they, after a while, because they were there for about 3 hours, they did some other activities. There was a very fast response by, you know, the local police, and it turned out that there was never an actual threat because it was there was no substance to the threat. Somebody made a threat, but there wasn't actually anything that really was going to happen behind it. And so that was very relieving. And even though the police never really thought there was a threat, there was still an abundance of caution in how they approach things, because at the end of the day, you would rather be safe than sorry. And the lockdown extended past normal dismissal time, but everybody did get to go home, and the buses came and they brought everybody home. Everybody was safe. There were some extra counselors at the school. It was a very unfortunate thing, you know, very upsetting for some people. Other students, they were not upset by it. I think the process was really smooth. And as a board member, it gave me an opportunity to see a little bit, because I have a kid who's in the high school, a little bit of what we learned about the security protocols in the building and things they would do. It was a super quick response. I mean, it was kind of like an active drill, except nobody knew it wasn't a drill. It wasn't. Everybody was safe. Things are good. We'll be reviewing formally as a board, I think mid or late November, things like that. There were some learning opportunities throughout it. There were some communication things. Most parents did get an email, but there was a small group of parents that didn't get the initial messaging. Once that was found out, there was an effort right away to reach out to them. But that created an opportunity to sync up some of the communication stuff.
Communication is at the heart of so much. And yep, looking over at you, Camille. It is in you know, the things that I'm sure we've all experienced in different ways in our home district. It matters so much how you do it, when you do it. All of these pieces do a lot to either build trust or erode trust. So thank you for sharing that, and glad that everybody is safe.
Oh yeah, yeah. There were definitely some parents who got nervous and went to a parking lot by the school and things like that. I had my daughter on the phone, so as soon as she called me, I went and checked my board email, and I was like, "No, I think you're okay. Just hang tight."
Seeing nobody else getting ready to speak, we could entertain a motion to adjourn for the evening. We have a motion by Ruthie Dowles and a second by Michael Birdman. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and we are adjourned at 8:23 p.m.